some of the best street food I've ever eaten was in Asia.
That may show up, but can you hear me back well? Yeah, you have. Yeah, yeah. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Uzbekistan Investment Outlook session during the 2022 annual meeting of the EBRD here in Marrakesh. It's my real pleasure to welcome you to today's session. Uzbekistan is a country I developed an affection for over the last 4.5 years since I started living there in Tashkent. I can tell you it's a very nice place, it's a very promising economy, and I would be thrilled to have you as host of the next annual meeting in Samarkand into 2023. Now, without further ado, I would like to start today's session introducing a short video run from Uzbekistan. It's an appetizer, so please can we have the video? Thank you very much. I would like to introduce our panel now. So I'm starting with the Deputy Minister of Investment and Foreign Trade, Mr. Shukrat Vafaev, alternate governor for the EBRD, who will soon be giving us a speech and presentation about Uzbekistan and the investment opportunities you can find there. Then, next to him, we have Mr. Dan Patterson. Dan Patterson is one of the long-standing foreign investors in Uzbekistan. He represents the company Silverleaf, who is active in cotton growing and the industry around it. He will tell us about his experiences. Next to him is Mrs. Susanna Hargitai, EBRD Regional Managing Director for Central Asia, based in Nur Sultan and visiting Tashkent quite often as well. And next to me is Mr. Spartak, is the right accent, Tetrashvili, Managing Director of TBC Bank, one of the newest comers in Uzbekistan's banking industry. They will all share their experiences with us, and they will all be given the floor to enlighten you on why investing in Uzbekistan is a great thing to do. Mr. Vafaev, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm not sure if
Microphone works there, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I thank you for joining us today for this investment outlook session on Uzbekistan and interest to my country, which we believe deserves this interest, especially given the progress, the speed and scale of reforms implemented in our country under the leadership of His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev, the President of the Republic. These reforms made and gave start to fundamental changes, making the country much more open, much more attractive for private and foreign investors. Some of the long awaited by the economy and by economic players, by households, measures over the last 5 years included liberalization of foreign exchange and external trade regimes, drastic reduction of tariff and non-tariff barriers in foreign and external trade, full elimination of previously existed foreign exchange restrictions and multiple exchange rates, and liberalization of current account transactions. And of course, we removed all restrictions on repatriation of revenues by the foreign investors. And naturally, these reforms contributed considerably to improved productivity of economy, made it more competitive and enabled Uzbekistan to maintain growth even through the difficult period of pandemic. And as a result, the major international rating agencies such as S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, they maintained stable or issued positive rating outlooks. And another result of recognition of our reforms is the fact that Uzbekistan last year was granted the status of a beneficiary country under the GSP Plus program of the European Union, which enables businesses from Uzbekistan to export over 6,000 types of goods duty-free to the market of the European Union. One important area, which I'm sure Dan is going to mention, is elimination of this dark stain on our reputation related to labor practices in the cotton market. And this year, the international community, represented by both international organizations like International Labour Organization and international NGOs, they lifted the ban which was previously applied to cotton from Uzbekistan and products from cotton in Uzbekistan. And one more attractive aspect of Uzbekistan, that even today, when the region and the world in general faces a lot of instability, our country remains safe, peaceful place to live and work. And of course, we'll make all efforts as a government, as a state, to maintain the peace and stability in the country and in the region. EBRD, at the background of these reforms, became an important partner for Uzbekistan. And as a recognition of these reforms, our partnership and the magnitude of this partnership with EBRD has grown considerably over the last 5 years. And Uzbekistan became one of the major recipients of investments of EBRD in the region, and basically taking a place in top 5 countries of operations of EBRD. We, of course, cannot pretend that reforms have completed and we reached all possible successes by now. And against that, our president introduced, starting his new term this year, the second term, he introduced enhanced strategy for next 5 years, which is based on 7 important pillars for any country, but is a priority for Uzbekistan and its policies now. And these priorities include strengthening the role of civil society, the role of law, maintaining sustainable and equitable economic growth, striving for just social policy, and acting as a responsible member of the global community, and conducting open and pragmatic foreign policy. This is a major principles of the strategy. They are, of course, supported by action plans, by concrete indicators and measures, and we systematically work on them and believe that implementation of this strategy will improve further attractiveness of Uzbekistan for our private investors and, of course, for foreign investors. During next, one of the results which we aim under this new strategy are reducing the poverty rate by half, providing vocational training to more than 7,000 women and girls, and increasing GDP per capita in the next 5 years by 2 times. I understand this is an ambitious goal, but it is achievable, and we're working hard towards these goals. And of course, we're very interested in increasing industrial sector of our economy, which is already quite diversified and visible, but we believe that the industries and development of manufacturing and introduction of innovative technologies, this is the only way for providing jobs for our population and for continuing in maintaining growth, which is required for our young and educated and hardworking population. I have prepared also a very short presentation, which will hopefully provide you a bit more data and information on Uzbekistan and opportunities available in Uzbekistan for investors. And we'll be happy to quickly present it for your attention. Can you move to the next slide, please? Uzbekistan is not a small country in any sense. Our total area of the country is 447,000 square kilometers. And the total population of the country has reached 35 million this year, and increasing almost by 1 million a year. We have very rapid growth of the population. And this population represents basically the half of the Central Asian population as a region. Our population is, and especially young population, is well educated. Literacy rate is universal. We speak Uzbek, we speak Russian, we speak English, we speak many other languages, but these three languages are pretty well trained and well learned by our population. We are rich in natural resources. We have over 2,000 deposits of minerals of different types, and our population is still very active in agriculture sector, and only 50% of the population lives in urban areas, but this urbanization rate and shift of the population towards urban areas is accelerating, providing opportunities for investors who are interested in real estate, in infrastructure development, and in urbanization in general. Next slide, please. What is a major factor of growth, which in Uzbekistan was traditionally pretty strong and sustained? First of all, it is very careful and anxious attitude towards macroeconomic stability. And we're always conservative on monetary policy, on fiscal policies, and on external debt policies. At the same time, we have over 20 million of labor force, third in terms of size among the CIS countries, and which is more than 60% of this labor force is at the age below 30. So it's young, educated, and ready to work. As a result, as indication, or I can quote this number of average growth over last years, which was equal to 7.5%. Another factor, important factor, is continued attention of the government to investments, and the annual investments in capital formation reached $20 billion US, and this is important source of economic growth for us. As I already said, we have rich natural resources and increasing. For example, in terms of copper production, Uzbekistan in medium term, in 4 or 5 years, will triple production of copper from the current 144 million tons. The law on 1,000 tons. The law on investment and investment activities, which was adopted in 2018, the law on public-private partnership. Next slide, please. And on currency regulation and tax code. This is a major documents which establish a legal framework for regulating businesses and investments and their activities in Uzbekistan. And we tried to reduce the number of law in the area of economic activities by eliminating hundreds, if not thousands, of documents, regulations, and making these particular laws very focused, very understandable, transparent, and easy to implement, and followed by investors. Next slide, please. You can see some of our priorities for medium term, increasing GDP per capita, raising industrial production and industrial sector share in the economy, increasing exports. By the way, Uzbekistan is pretty much export-oriented country with the value and share of exports in our GDP exceeds 60% usually. And of course, another important for any country today and for sustainable development in general topic is the green economy, and we are very much committed to priorities and objectives of the global community in fighting impact of climate change, in reducing carbon emissions, and we are very active, and it is formalized in our strategy, working already on increasing the share of renewables and reducing carbon emissions by economic entities. And by 2026, for example, the share of renewables in our total energy mix is reaching 25% from almost zero a couple of years ago. Of course, digital economy, development of capital markets, and investment projects are other additional important areas for the government's activities in the medium term. Next slide, please. Some of the results, as you see, starting 2017, with the exception of 2018, the foreign direct investments in our economy kept growing, and we very much look forward to continue this trend, and hopefully with some inputs from your side. Main industries where we see investors active is, of course, textile, manufacturing, power sector, chemical sector, education, and others. Next slide, please. EBRD is well presented in Uzbekistan and helps us with in bringing private investors and foreign investors in its operations in different sectors. All in all, there are 95 projects. The cumulative disbursements of EBRD in Uzbekistan exceeded $2 billion, and private sector share of the portfolio is equal to 45%, and we're striving to reach together 50% this year. Next slide, please. We are experimenting with special economic zones. The results were mixed so far, and we are currently working. We have established a number of them in different regions, focused on industrial production, on pharmaceuticals, for example, on agriculture, wood processing, and tourism. And they were, as I said, partially successful. And now we are working on, together with our international partners, with IFC of the World Bank in particular, and EBRD, on improving the legal framework and improving support of the state and the government in enabling them through access to infrastructure, and hope that all these activities will add dynamics and momentum to activities of all our special economic zones, which will become important points of foreign investors' activities in our country. Next, please. What is extremely high and important in our reforms agenda for now, currently, is state-owned enterprise reforms. And Uzbekistan used to be completely state-dominated economy. Since 2017, we are reducing the share of the state in all sectors through privatization and through improvement of operational activities and transformation of enterprises which cannot be privatized for one or another reason, and making sure that at some point at the right time they will be attractive for private investors. So far, in our plans for this year is complete transformation of over 620 state-owned enterprises, and transformation is, we have clear parameters, so it's moving to IFRS accounting first of all, setting decent and proper corporate governance structure that independent board members are hired. So there are indicators and KPIs, and state-owned enterprise are measured against all of these KPIs and given, and the results are presented to the government at highest levels. 71 of state-owned enterprises will be privatized and through competitive process and using individual privatization approach, and we'll hire consultants to take us through the enterprise through this process. 77 of the state assets, real estate pieces, will be auctioned and sold in the market. And another 479 enterprises, again, will be sold and privatized through much easier and online auctioning processes. Next, please. We previously had, in our efforts to bring investors in the country, had very complex, untransparent, and very subjective set of incentives provided to different investors in different forms. The overall policy of the government is a dramatic reduction of tax burden in general. For example, the corporate tax, which is now at 12%, was previously used to be starting from 24 to over 45%. And now it's universal for all enterprise at 12%. So we started by eliminating all these tax incentives which distorted a general playing field, distorted the market, and were sending wrong signals to marketplace. Nevertheless, we still keep a number of tax exemptions, and which are aimed at promoting larger scale investments, and depending on the size of the investment, you can enjoy tax exemptions provided by the tax code, not by separate regulation of the document, by the tax code on a universal basis to all investors, tax exemptions from 3 to 7 year period. Next slide, please. Well, my staff likes stressing our mineral resources. They are indeed sizable. We are large gold producers. We produce more than 100,000 tons of gold annually. We are important in gas production. We are net gas exporter. Copper, aluminium. Sorry, aluminium is not available in our country, but some rare metals like lithium, like nickel, titan, they do exist in Uzbekistan. We have proven the deposits, and we are working now on bringing private investors to work with us and developing these deposits and profiting from production of these natural resources. As an example of foreign investors already working in the mining sector. I can bring an example of French Arano, which is producing uranium, exploring and producing uranium in Uzbekistan, and is very happy and is planning to expand its activities in Uzbekistan. Next slide, please. Let me finally also stress the importance and good results of our work aimed at creating open, transparent, understandable for everybody environment in power sector, which enabled us to bring investors in power generation, which are working now on building over 7-8 gigawatt of different types of power. Mostly solar and wind, but there is also gas-based power stations being developed by foreign investors. And we'll continue this work, we'll continue putting auctions and hope to replicate our success with solar and wind, where through auctions we received one of the lowest tariffs in the region of Central Asia and Europe. Our latest tariff offered by a foreign investor, reputable company for solar energy is 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour, and for wind is 2.56 cents per kilowatt hour. So finally, to sum up, next slide, please. What is attractive in Uzbekistan for investments? As we believe, resources, its location with developed infrastructure and access to large markets of neighboring countries and even larger countries which are represented by China and Russian Federation, Turkey, and others. Attractive GDP growth rates, which definitely demonstrate that the market is growing and the size of the market will be interesting for any size of investment. Labor force, as I said, educated, young, and keen to work and hardworking. Continued work of the government on improving, simplifying investment climate, reducing all opportunities for red tape barriers, artificially created by bureaucrats and corruption. And of course, tax exemptions which are available for foreign investors, all opportunities extended to foreign investors through economic zones, and our continued work on reduction of the tax burden. I understand that it's very difficult to represent a large economy as Uzbekistan with interesting history and even more interesting future and potential in a short presentation. But I hope that you will come and visit Uzbekistan. Our country is open to guests, providing visa-free access to almost 90 country citizens. So otherwise, if you still need visa, just let us know. Let us know through the embassy, consulate, or just online fill the application, and you will easily receive your visa and will be able to benefit from visiting Uzbekistan and seeing what is happening there by your own eyes. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bafayev, for presenting us the 2022-2026 development strategy of Uzbekistan, giving us a few highlights of Uzbekistan's richness in natural resources, advantages, young population, highlighting the cooperation with the EBRD, and also let me just go back in my memory in one of these slides you had when you were presenting in bar chart the foreign direct investment. So there was a small dip in 2018, and then it was an aggressive, scale-up bars continuity year on year on year. So I think that the international community is appreciating, is responding to the changes in Uzbekistan and to the reforms, and is becoming, more familiar and closer and more interested. We also, the EBRD, are one of these foreign direct investors, and our own bar chart is quite aggressive, actually, also on a year basis. And this is what I would like to use as bridge to pass the floor to Zuzana Hargitai, Regional Managing Director, to tell us a few things about EBRD, about how do we read the reforms in Uzbekistan, and how do you see the future, and anything else you might want to highlight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akis. 4 still a bit higher level points, if you allow me. One is about the GDP growth. So last year, as Mr. Vafayev mentioned, the GDP growth reached 7.4%, and it was charted to grow. There are certain impacts of geopolitical events. You would have seen in EBRD regional economic prospects that we revised the growth rate to 4% and 5% for 2022-2023 respectively. However, I consulted our regional economist who holds the crystal ball, and he was saying that he sees there in that crystal ball a rebound already for 2024 above 7%, and then depending on the reforms that Mr. Vafayev also outlined and will be supported by EBRD, Uzbekistan is easily reaching 10% growth from 2026 forward. Another bit that investors would be considering is inflation. And what you have, and all the credit goes, I think, Shukrat, you would agree with me, to the central bank that is leading a very conservative monetary policy that reined on inflation already last year. It brought it down to 9.7% in 2021. It's intervening this year as well. So again, thanks to a very consistent conservative monetary policy, inflation is well managed in Uzbekistan as well. The second point from the high level, obviously, I mean, you can't talk about Uzbekistan without talking about what Mr. Vafayev mentioned, reducing the footprint of the state and privatizations. So again, EBRD has been there together with other IFIs advising so that on the one hand, state-owned enterprises, they are managed much, much better, and Mr. Vafayev outlined what corporate governance are, kind of measures, improvement measures have been taken and are being taken. And also, we are there to look at transparent privatization through open tenders. Please watch out. What should we say, Shukrat? I would particularly highlight my favorite Fergana Azot and Dehanabad potash plant privatizations that should come online this summer already. And if you talk about implications of the geopolitical situation, I think fertilizer industry should sound as a very promising area to invest in Uzbekistan. The third area I wanted to mention also for financial investors, that the landscape is also changing when it comes to capital markets. So again, the Ministry of Finance continues working on a new capital market law, and we are also advising on it. It should improve the efficiency of conducting IPOs and security payment orders, designate functions of underwriters, and enhance accounting and listing requirements. It will also introduce sukuk bonds and other types of instruments. And as part of the ongoing capital market reform, a 10-year government bond was issued by the Uzbek Republican Currency Exchange auction in January 2022. So watch out also for developments in the capital markets. Third high-level point relates to the green agenda. And I will tell more about how we have been supporting it, including through investment. But let me just point out that a hydrogen energy strategy was adopted in Uzbekistan in April 2021, and it envisages the construction of comprehensive hydrogen energy infrastructure, driving overall the country's energy efficiency and energy security. On the digitalization field, again, I hope EBRD will working very closely in the coming months and years with the Uzbek government on expanding the high-speed broadband network to reach smaller cities and rural areas. Again, we will discuss with our Uzbek partners, but what we have done also elsewhere, including in Southeastern Europe, is a combination of sovereign investments with opportunity for private sector to come in, especially for the last mile. Now, Akis, you mentioned kind of your bar charts, and you started, when did you start? You started with, let me talk about investment terms, with $87 million. Yes, wasn't it, in 2018? And single-handedly, he drove it to $690 million US dollars investments in 2021, which was a stellar year because over 90% of our investments went for private sector. What is it that we are working on? And I'm talking to you as investors, but also, let's face it, also as suppliers and advisors. So again, you attended in February, yes, the groundbreaking ceremony. You flew to Nukus.
Yes.
And you drove a couple of miles away for a project that Mr. Vafayev refers to, and it's with Aqua Energy. It's an investment into 100 megawatt wind power, which is part of the overall ambition of Uzbekistan to reach 25, I think we shall reach more than 25% of renewable energy in the total energy production by 2026. So wind and solar auctions will continue. We ourselves, as EBRD, signed a mandate to provide assistance just alone 2 gigawatt worth of new wind capacity. Solar will very much be on the agenda, and again, Uzbekistan also sees its transition, in particular from coal, to cleaner energy through gas, and we have already financed the Sirdarya 1 CHP, and we are looking at also tendered through a kind of open and competitive tender, Sirdarya 2 CHP in Uzbekistan, on the back of a very consistent implementation of the low-carbon pathway for the energy sector. Not only do we invest in generation, but you would immediately ask, so would the network put up with it? So again, we are discussing network enhancement investment with NEGU, which is the transmission system operator in Uzbekistan. We'll continue with our investments in water infrastructure. We are looking at irrigation, but where we would also like, together obviously with our partners, and is driven primarily by our Uzbek partners, is to bring in investors in infrastructure projects such as transport, such as social infrastructure, to mention a few bits. So I mentioned irrigation, but we see potential bringing in private sector partners for the irrigation pumps. So we are looking at concepts, how to do it. We pulled it off in Greece. We would like to import some good experience in that area. We are working on PPPs for schools. It's a new area which we would like to expand in. We'll see. Again, we know the Uzbek government is very desirous bringing in also foreign investors into the healthcare sector, and obviously it's transport. So the talk is about airport concessions, initial focus perhaps on regional airports. We'll have an active dialogue also for Tashkent Airport proper. We are working, I know that Mr. Vafayev is never happy with the pace how we are working, but we are accelerating the preparation of the motorway PPP for Tashkent-Samarkand, which will come online hopefully in 2023. Yes, that's what we agreed, Alkis. Is it 2022 is the start, but look, financial closing always takes a bit of time. Where else are we present? We adopted a keen city, Samarkand, as part of our Green Cities family, and soon you will see 2 other little spots on the huge map of Uzbekistan, Nukus and Andijan, for green cities. It means strategic plan to green the cities for urban transport, municipal infrastructure, but also unavoidably it brings in the smart city component. So again, this is where we would like to explore the potential for PPP to bring into these 3 cities. I know that one of my colleagues, our common friend, is seeing already Nukus as the super green city, making use of all the renewable projects that will be implemented in this area of Uzbekistan, in Karakalpakstan. We are present there in the banking sector. I see a friend of mine here, Jahan Shamsiev, who is only too eager to promote what we would be doing, at least with 2 banks, probably even a third one, with Uzbekistan and Asaka Bank, whom we will be preparing with our pre-privatization funding for privatization, probably depending on your interest, in 2023. We are very impatient to have good strategic or financial investors for banks that we shall be working on together with our Uzbek partners so that they are clean, commercialized, ready to adopt investors. Last but not least, we have already worked with the private sector. I mean, here you are, one of our equity investments, TBC. We have also put equity in a retail chain. So not only do we come in with debt financing that we have done, yes, with one of your partners, Indorama. We'll be discussing other projects with Silverleaf. Dan has a couple of ideas for us to discuss, but we'll be there for you. We are working also with the 2 companies Mr. Bafayev mentioned, the Al-Malik mining and ore processing company, Navoy mining and ore processing company. No, they are not for strategic investors, but financial investors. Please watch out, because these are tremendous assets that the Uzbek partners want to harness. They are extremely well managed by now and still improving, including with EBRD assistance on the environmental and social governance side. And finally, perhaps most importantly, we'll be there with you as our Uzbek partners are constantly working on improving the business environment. With them, we have established a Foreign Investors Council, which is working through its working groups targeting specific areas, anything between further improving the tax regime up to vocational training, how to get job-ready youth for foreign investors to come in. So we'll be our partners to help further improve overall the business environment. I think we can answer a lot more questions, but this is where I would stop.
That's correct. Dear Zuzana, thank you very much. I mean, you have highlighted all the EBRD activities, all the sectors, I mean, the progress of Uzbekistan. And I'm sure that, in the audience, I can't imagine there is a representative from a sector we have not touched on yet, because you cover the whole spectrum. Where we didn't say much is about cotton, right? So we leave this for Dan Patterson, who is our next speaker. Now, the cotton industry in Uzbekistan, Mr. Bafayev also mentioned about this in his speech, has going through tremendous positive reform. And very recently, we had the witnesses of the International Labour Organization and of Cotton Campaign saying that, Uzbekistan is really ready for cotton exports. The legacy problems that used to be in the past are no longer there, and this is to congratulate the government for its achievements and also to convey to the world that, yeah, there is a growing sector of huge importance in Uzbekistan, and that we have a good representative from this sector with great experience to tell us a few words about how did you see this progress in practice? How did you live through this? And what would you like to share with the audience? Please, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Alkis. We've been talking and listening to a lot of strategy about Uzbekistan, about a lot of the reforms, a lot of the changes that have happened. I want to share with you my story about why we were in Uzbekistan in the first place, coming all the way from the United States, and about our experience. So hopefully the audience can begin to understand a little bit more tactically about the true investor experience as well as an operator's experience. Because not only are we investors in Uzbekistan, we operate on the ground with our own people from the U.S., but also from Uzbekistan. So why are we in Uzbekistan to begin with? We have a family history that goes back to the 1970s in cotton and cottonseed genetics. And so my personal experience began in 1994 in Uzbekistan and then re-engaged in 2018. When President Mirziyoyev was elected to his first term, he committed to the General Assembly of the United Nations that he would eradicate forced and child labor in the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan. And we were invited to be a participant in that, and not from a strategy standpoint in creating policy, but really from an implementation perspective, on the field, on the ground, and working with the cotton harvest in Uzbekistan. So we brought technology, we brought equipment, we brought practices, techniques, and so we've been engaged. This is our 4th growing season in Uzbekistan, and we've had a myriad of success and challenges and obstacles. And so what I want to share with you is a couple of our experiences in kind of 3 particular areas. And what did we walk into? The agricultural landscape. And then what was our interaction with basically the local, regional, and republic government? And how did we engage as a foreign investor with them? And then what were some of the systematic obstacles that we faced, and how do we overcome them? So when we arrived, the agricultural landscape was somewhat in a maybe deficiencies in soil health and practices, plant health. There were a lot of struggles there. So there was the necessity for R&D. Irrigation infrastructure, Susanna just spoke about irrigation in Uzbekistan. The old system that was in place was a very beautiful architecture, but it had not been maintained. So a lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of leaks, a lot of inefficiencies there, and water being one of the precious commodities for agricultural development, very important to get this right. There was a lack of modernization. You basically had since the kind of the post-Soviet time and the independence of the first 27 years, you had a lack of investment in modernization under the initial administration. So that was kind of what we were walking into. The relationship that we had with kind of local, regional, and republic government was quite different. Deputy Minister Vafayev is at the republic level, and so we saw their vision, we listened to it, we bought into it, we understood what the kind of short-term, mid-term, long-range goals were for the country. And that gave us confidence that Uzbekistan, from the top, was going in the right direction. It took a little time to trickle down to the regional and local levels, and so we were challenged. Coming from the United States, we don't have the government involved in our day-to-day operations. We would, particularly have visits by our regional governor or our local governor to come by and help us with some of our operational strategy. And so what we needed was independence. We needed to be able to come in and do what we thought, and we need to do our own research and development. We needed to be left alone for a period of time, make our own mistakes, correct our mistakes, consult with locals, consult with scientists, and figure out what's different between what we do in the United States and what they're doing in Uzbekistan, and how can we participate in that evolutionary process towards modernization. So there were some pressures to kind of perform every day, because a lot of that was statistic driven. When you're going from a central planned government and economy to privatization, there are going to be some pain thresholds that you have to step through, and that was one of them. And we had maybe different short-term and intermediate-term objectives than say the local and regional government. And what I'll do is I'll kind of talk to you about how that's changed in just a moment. But some of the systemic and systematic obstacles that we faced were some of the issues and challenges with banking laws, because you're going from basically state-owned enterprises to privatization. So yes, there was some heartburn and indigestion in that process of engaging in doing business, just day-to-day business from an operational perspective, from a banking perspective. Access to capital. Even though we were investing our own capital over there, we were looking at ways to leverage that and structure that so that we could become more efficient with our capital structure. Logistics. Well, there are 44 landlocked countries in the world, and there are 2 double landlocked countries, one being Uzbekistan, the other being Liechtenstein. So it's a little different to be double landlocked inside of Europe versus being double landlocked inside of Central Asia. One thing that Deputy Minister Vafayev mentioned is actually location as a strategic benefit. Well, I would say probably prior to this current pandemic and some of the external shocks that are going on, maybe that would have been challenged. But now, with kind of a deglobalization aspect of what's happening, we're seeing maybe more inventory being built in our areas. How does that impact us? Well, with John Deere, those parts are not manufactured in Uzbekistan. So the partners there are holding more inventory than they used to because of the supply chain issues. So logistics in looking at Uzbekistan as kind of a regional logistics player is actually, I think, going to be a very good strategic model for the foreseeable future. And then lastly was the black stain on Uzbek cotton that was globally banned by many brands and countries. And so recently that ban was lifted because Uzbekistan, in the first term of President Mirziyoyev, lived up to his pledge to the General Assembly of the United Nations, eradicating forced and child labor from the cotton harvest. So that was achieved in 2021, and the impact of that is now Uzbekistan is open for business around the globe. And so many of you may or may not know that probably Uzbekistan has one of the youngest textile industries as a whole, from looking at plant and equipment in the world. So some of the latest technology in textile manufacturing exists in Uzbekistan. And that's a tremendous asset in looking at economic development and global participation.
Dan, I apologize. We are really running short of time.
Okay.
So I would like, with what you just said, if you can enlighten us on how do you see now, with all this progress and all what you went through?
Yep.
Is it a positive experience? And would you invite others to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll quickly get to the point. The point is, in Uzbekistan, these reforms that the government has been talking about are not just rhetoric. They're actually implementable, and they have had significant impact on the efficiency of how we operate. Namely, you mentioned earlier that instead of having a decree and an exception for tariffs or taxes or benefits that we had to receive when we first came in, now everyone enjoys those. So the standardization of the reform process has made doing business in Uzbekistan and investing in Uzbekistan much more impactful and much more efficient. So I would just close by saying that our experience hasn't been easy, and it hasn't been overly difficult, but what's key is the Uzbek government's posture, and the trend is positive for foreign investors and foreign operations in the country. It's not going to be perfect, so you have to have a set of expectations that you're going to be able to work through it, but they're not perfect in their own environment, whether they're coming from the United States or Europe. So thank you very much for letting me share that.
Thank you very much. There is no perfect environment, is there? Now, I would like to have, with the few minutes that we have left on our time, to pass the word to you, Spartak, to tell us your experience and how do you see Uzbekistan's banking market? How is TBC Bank working in Uzbekistan, and what is able to do?
Thank you very much. I'll try to be rather short and went you through our experience and our amazing story so far in Uzbekistan. Basically, we were starting looking at this market in 2018, and back then when we analyzed the market, it was kind of a perfect fit for our expansion from the Georgian perspective. And the 35 million citizens, and being very young itself, so the average age of the Uzbekistan is 29 years old, it's very promising. So basically, we got our license, banking license, in beginning of 2020, and we started our operations in late 2020 with friends and family basis. And the real operations we started last year, January, so we are 1.5 years old, more or less. And as my colleagues already mentioned, I would say that tempo of the reforms is amazing. You can imagine how conservative is the government regulations towards the banking, right? But even here, we see dramatic reforms happen. And this is really amazing. I used to work in different countries, and this kind of speed I barely see. You can imagine that so basically, we are the digital bank. This is very important to mention because we understood that the digital arm of the banking sector in Uzbekistan was not as much developed that we saw the niche. It's kind of blue ocean, today's Uzbekistani market. And in order digital bank to be operational, a lot of regulations need to be changed. And within 2 years of period, central bank has made a lot of changes that made us operational. We're like fully digitally operational. Even the last changes allows us to onboard the clients without any physical touch at all. The client can download the application on their smartphone and be fully banked. So, and we think with our project, we are helping a lot the financial inclusion of the population, which is super important. I mean, anybody who has a smartphone today in Uzbekistan and has a internet coverage can be banked, basically. They can get a loan, they can have a deposit or make the money transfers and so on and so forth. With 1.5 years of operations, I will just give you a couple of figures, which for us is really amazing achievement. We managed to get more than 1.5 million registered users. We managed to disburse more than 100,000 loans, and we have more than 80,000 depositors. So these figures are pretty much amazing from our perspective. And we see that the adaptation and the acceptance from the clientele of the digital services is growing and growing. Because we were thinking, okay, the country who is just developing, how much the digital services will be accepted from the population. But it's, I mean, I would say the country is ready to learn, they're ready to try, and most importantly, they're ready to change. And a lot of things are happening, and I thank EBRD to their supporting us in our amazing journey. Thank you very much. And I think this is the very momentum to go to the market and enjoy the blue ocean benefits. So enjoy the reforms that have been presented by the Deputy Minister. And I think the market is very promising. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your enlightening comments and positiveness about reading the market and the prospects it has. Can I ask the team up there, do we have time for questions? Or yeah, I don't see anybody responding, so. Okay. All right. I've been getting conflicting messages on this. So I would like to encourage one question, just to honor the structure of the meeting. We have one attendee who would like to have a question. Can we have the microphone, please? Please tell us who you are.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina Lisichina. I represent civil society organization Bankwatch Network. We work very closely with the EBRD and our partners in Uzbekistan. It was a very impressive presentation here. A lot of economic issues have been covered. Unfortunately, not a word about civil society development and risks in that field. So I would like probably to ask for your comments or leave just for your information. The fact that, I mean, increase in investments is obvious in Uzbekistan. I think last year it was the record in the EBRD investments in Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, we can't see the same improvements in the civil society development in Uzbekistan. And we all know that for the EBRD, stakeholders' engagement, public participation is one of the key requirements, right? This is the value for you. This is what you actively promote, and we really appreciate that. However, despite this prioritization for the EBRD, we are not sure how the EBRD and the clients of the EBRD could ensure this stakeholder engagement in Uzbekistan when the civil space is shrinking, keep shrinking there. Unfortunately, civil society, independent civil society organizations are not registered. Unfortunately, a lot of human rights defenders are under attack. Last years, let's say. A lot of bloggers have been sentenced to prison to the years, let's say, for the last years. And this is kind of ongoing trend. This is the situation which keep going, and unfortunately we don't see any improvements in that sense. So my question and probably my comment would be how the EBRD and its clients in the Uzbekistan going to address these issues? Thank you so much.
So this is a question to us, not to the government, maybe, or let me say one word to this. When I joined the EBRD team on the ground, one of the things that I felt that my young team was very proud about was their ability to write comments and participate in the life, social life in Uzbekistan through media, enjoying, lots of media freedom and expression, freedom of expression, to the extent that they were really happy about this. They were seeing for themselves a big change. So we need to put maybe the time reference to this question and saying, is it getting better or worse, or what are we comparing it with? Overall, I have to say a positive picture. As far as for the EBRD, to answer your question, we are very adamant in our procedures, and we are taking your comments, not only yours, but also every comment that reaches us, very, very seriously. We do investigate, and when we see that there is a need, we do involve the authorities and try to resolve the issues. I cannot comment on bloggers because being imprisoned or something. I mean, I don't know. I hear, but I from you, not from any other source. So I cannot comment on this because I don't know much. I can say the overall picture is, let's say, it's something in the making. Reforms are happening. And if there are any hiccups or mistakes, I'm positive they will be corrected, because I don't see in the government any counterparty objecting to the idea of openness. Actually, I think everybody in the government that I deal with personally, being there, is open to engage in difference of opinions, entertain, hear, and try to become better, a more inclusive society. That's the trend I feel on the ground. So it's a bit positive. Not that I don't understand the question, sorry. But, so, any other comments would you like to make, Zuzha, or you, Mr. Vafaev? You would like to say.
From EBRD point of view, when Odir Renobasso was visiting Uzbekistan, you might be aware we also organized a meeting with civil societies. And honestly, I was expecting a kind of more dynamic discussion at the time. There was some of the criticism that you mentioned also conveyed to EBRD president, but overall it was about the thought. It was about the openness. Number two, what I wanted to add, because you are keenly aware as BankWatch what is our policy, how we apply it to public sector projects. It's there, public consultation, taking into account when we are working with private sector clients, and you must be aware of that, we also require them to comply with what we call the EBRD Environmental and Social Action Plan. So again, and this is a compliance that we monitor, and we apply it whether it's in Uzbekistan, Hungary, or Montenegro. And that is a point that we are making, and I know that I've been making to some of our private sector clients so that they engage. Beyond that, it's about the observation that we do, and you are also keenly aware how we do our political assessment. These are my additional comments, but I think Mr. Vafaev also wanted to come back on this.
Yeah, thank you for an interesting question. I don't want to get overly defensive, because despite a very pretty murky picture you presented here, the situation with transparency, with attention to the public view and requests to anti-corruption measures improved dramatically over the 5-6 years. And we talk a lot about strategies of the president, but strategies of the president are not something very, high-level theoretical thing in our policy making and implementation. Strategies, and this is a difference of our president and his government probably. The strategies are supported by action plans. The action plans then develop into roadmaps with KPIs. And one of the major aspects and objectives of the new strategy for 2022-2026 of President Mirziyoyev is protecting, it's difficult to translate it directly in English, but I'll try. Protecting the decency of citizens. This term in Uzbek covers his rights as a social rights, as a citizen, his civil rights, and his property. You can recall that a couple of years there were a lot of complaints about local authorities trying to improve their cities, removing the houses of some people of their businesses. And that received a lot of reaction from the population. And the government, the central government, and the president and court system, they reacted immediately. And one of the amazing examples how different our system, especially in terms of the fairness of treating people you are referring probably or implying, we used to have, was the example given by the president himself. He said, you know what, I looked at the court cases of the government against businessmen or citizens, and can you imagine that in 16 years, there was no one single private entity or citizen who won the court case against the government. How it come? How it's possible? What kind of court is that? And so these things happen. These things change, cannot be changed overnight. But as my colleagues mentioned here, it's gradual and pretty strong process. And we definitely believe that the social values, citizen rights, are important factors in decision making. I can talk a lot of other measures on how we, by law, required now to have public views reflected in our public financed investment projects, or how anti-corruption agency is part of any public bidding process, and so on and so forth, but it's going to take much longer time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this response. Now, we don't have more time for additional questions. What I would like to suggest is, don't be discouraged. Send us the questions. You know my email, it's everywhere, you know, in Zula's email. Please send us any questions you may have. We will follow up. It may take some time. We will respond. Of course, the civil society is going to have a very important role. At the next annual meeting in Samarkand, we will be in touch with all the questions. And as far as the investments and our interested investors are concerned, we are always there. The EBRD office in Tashkent, and then also in Andijan, then in Urgench, and soon in Karshi in the south. We have teams there, and we are all next to you, listening to the market, willing to be your long-term partner. We are a long-term partner to you, and we hope that we will be also with Dan soon. Thank you very much for attending today's investment outlook session for Uzbekistan. Looking forward to welcome you in Samarkand in 2023. Thank you.